welcome everybody to the second video of my Lnat series. Today I'll be having a chat about section A of the Lnat, which is the multiple choice section. The first thing, just before you start watching this video, is I would go onto the Lnat website now, download one of the passages from one of their practice papers so you can have it in front of you and so that you understand what I'm on about when I'm talking about the different passages and the questions and that sort of thing. Also, if you've not watched my first Lnat video, which has already been put up onto my channel, that's just a general overview to the Lnat and that will be really useful. So, section A of the Lnat is 95 minutes long, and as I said in my first video, you have 12 passages within that 95 minutes and there's 42 questions overall. So that's probably about 7 minutes per passage, because you'll probably end up spending a little bit longer on some passages and a little bit less on some other ones. So yeah, just in general, keep an eye on your timing. There is a countdown in the corner. But again, it's really helpful to do a couple of practices, just because then you'll realise really how much you need to pace yourself. First of all, what is the Lnat looking at? So section A of the Lnat is helping to figure out whether you would be a good law student, because as a law student you're doing a lot of reading, but you're also having to make sure that you understand what you're reading and you're able to differentiate the different opinions and that sort of thing in whatever you are reading. So something that I've found actually quite funny is that for the past term I've been doing some Lnat classes at a sixth form college in Oxford, and I was going through all of the different section A questions and passages and that sort of thing, and actually now I find them quite easy because I've had a year of being a law student and doing this sort of thing daily, and so it really does test the skills that you use as a law student. However, when I was in year 13 and having to sit my Lnat, oh my goodness, it was terrifying. So hopefully this video will help you a little bit. So section A is obviously the 12 passages, and all of them are not that long. They're probably between 300 and 500 words. Hopefully right now you have a passage in front of you so you'll see what I mean. So the questions, as I said before, will be looking at whether you understand what you're reading, but on a really sort of detailed level. So questions might be, what's the main argument that the author's making? Because, you know, sometimes authors will use lots and lots of different arguments, but there'll be an overarching theme, and as a law student that's something that's really important to be able to identify so that you can properly argue against or for the academics work that you're reading. In addition to this, quite a few Lnat questions in the past, the passages have had lots of different opinions interwoven within them. So it might say, what does A think about this? And you have to be careful that you're not saying what B thinks about this, because sometimes the two can be quite confusing, and especially if you just skim reading, that can really catch you out. But that being said, you have to remember that the questions will vary a lot. So I had a maths question in mind. I had a passage that was about mice, and it was asking me to find the area of a mouse cage to see if I'd picked out the right numbers and stuff. So yeah, the questions vary loads, and I can give you a general overview and general tips, but you really don't know what kind of things you'll be faced with on the day. So the first thing that you'll want to do is to figure out which method works best for you in approaching section A of the Lnat. In terms of reading, a lot of people say don't read the passage first and look at the questions and then go through it. However, I personally found that when I was practicing, I found that reading the passage in detail first, then going on to look at the questions, and then skim reading again to find the answers was what worked for me. So this is where practice really comes in, because you can find out what really suits you. But whichever way you approach the Lnat, there are some general tips that I think are really useful to know for section A. First of all, even though it probably seems really obvious, read carefully and do not rush. It's really tempting when you have a countdown in the corner and a big list of questions and a huge passage to think, oh, I really need to read through this really quickly. And when I was first practicing, I was getting so many of the questions wrong just because I wasn't reading it properly. And so making sure that you're really going through it, reading every single word of that passage, that's really important, and then you'll not get as confused. The next thing I would say is it can be really, really helpful at the end of each paragraph that you read, or maybe just each sort of couple of sentences, to summarise in your own words, in your head, what the author is trying to say. So figure out what the author's line of argument is, what their point of view is, and just kind of any facts that you've picked up from it. This will take you 2 seconds in your head to just kind of consolidate that knowledge, and it will actually save you time, because when you're then coming to answer your questions, you've just got a better idea of what those underlying facts are from that passage. Finally, don't be put off by any archaic or confusing language. So, as I said in my introduction video, the Lnat passages are from so many different sources. They're from a huge range, and some of them you might have that are 16th century, some of them will be 21st century, and everything in between. Some of them might use really technical language because they'll be from some sort of science thing. What I would say is there'll probably be words in there that you don't understand, and that's completely fine. Try and sort of make, if you need to know the answer to it, then try to just make a guess based on the context. If you're sitting the Lnat, you're a perfectly capable person, I'm sure, so it's really fine. Don't get too put off by that. So then once you've read the passage, obviously you've got to answer the questions. So just a few tips for that. First of all, don't make huge leaps. Sometimes you'll be asked to infer something because whatever is in the passage won't explicitly answer the question. So inference is fine. However, making huge leaps isn't. And so even if it's probably the case that something has occurred or that the author believes this from what they've said, don't then click that answer. So in your multiple choice there will definitely be, well, I say definitely, it's very highly likely that there will be questions where multiple answers could be correct. Really making sure that you're just focusing on what is in the passage and not what your own knowledge or sort of what you deduce from it. It's really important that you focus on what is actually said. Secondly, make sure you're reading the questions carefully. That's, again, probably really obvious, but it's a really easy mistake to make, as I said, when you're rushing through. Just making sure that you really understand what the question is asking and that you understand all of the possible answers. Finally, I would say if there is anything that you're completely stuck on, I took this approach. So I would read my passage, I would go back to the questions, read the question through, then go back and skim for the answer. But if I didn't find the answer and I still really wasn't sure, I would do it definitely just sort of going through by process of elimination. So go to the questions, think, what could be the answer? There'll probably be about 2 that definitely aren't true, and then you might be left with 2 that potentially could be. And that's where you just kind of weigh things up. At the end of the day, even if you have absolutely no idea, just click something. No points are deducted for wrong answers, but you have taken away a chance that you could have got that right. Thank you for watching this video. I'll be back soon with part 3, which will be all about section B, essay writing.